On January 8th, 1935, Elvis Presley was born in a shotgun shack in East Tupelo, Mississippi, the poorest part of one of the poorest towns of the poorest state in America. Elvis came from a family of sharecroppers, the poorest of the poor of agricultural workers. His identical twin brother, Jesse, born 35 minutes before him, died at birth. There are nearly 100,000 Elvis impersonators in the world. An eerie testament to the man who spent his life haunted by the shadow of his exact double. In his detailed and extensive psychoanalytic psychobiography, The Inner Elvis, Dr. Peter Whitmer, a clinical psychologist, marks the death of Jesse as the single most significant event in Elvis's life. A twinless twin, a son who survives while his twin brother dies, believes that he bears the burden of living for two, of filling the hole left by his twin, of becoming twice the son to his bereaved mother, of loving and supporting her twice as much. Elvis experienced the closest possible relationship imaginable before he was born, sharing his mother's womb with his twin for 9 months. This enmeshed relationship was stripped away at the moment of birth. The only replacement for this bond would be with his mother. Equally, if not more significant than his state of being a twinless twin, was Elvis's symbiotic relationship with his mother, Gladys. A fervent follower of the folk rites and testaments of the Assembly of God Pentecostal Church, Gladys truly believed that a twin who lives inherits the strength of one who died. Unable to bear more children after the harrowing birth of her twins, Elvis was an only child and held a singular position in his mother's eye. By all accounts, Gladys lived for Elvis, accompanying him to school every day to make sure that he didn't get picked on by bullies.
Whitmer referred to their relationship as psychosexual incest, a non-sexual enmeshment of two people into one, for capturing the symbiotic unity of mother and child prior to the moment of birth.
Freud referred to the same type of symbolically incestuous relationship between mother and son as the Oedipus complex. For Elvis, becoming a star meant that he could fulfill his deepest desire, to support his mother. With the first fruits of his success, he bought her a new house in Memphis and a new car. Gladys begged her son to quit showbiz and buy a furniture store so he could get married and settle down and stop going out on the road all the time. Without Elvis in the house, Gladys felt abandoned, helpless, anxious, and alone. As Sam Phillips, Elvis's first producer and manager, said, "She was a wonderful and warm woman, but she had one flaw, if you will. Elvis was totally her life." When the money really began pouring in, Elvis bought Gladys Graceland, but success came at a price. To become a superstar, Elvis had to be away from Gladys, first on the road as a performer, and then in Hollywood as a movie star. Gladys couldn't stand to be apart from Elvis. She lived in terror that something bad would happen to her baby boy, and that she'd lose him just like she lost Jesse. She drowned her fears in food and alcohol, becoming sicker and sicker with each month.
Her doctor prescribed her dexedrine, an amphetamine, to help her keep her weight down.
While on the road, Elvis dutifully called his mother every night, regardless of where he was or what he was doing. He complained of missing his mother horribly on road trips, and while she lived, he never stayed away from Memphis too long. And while Elvis would later become famous for his womanizing, while his mother was alive, his physical relationships with the female fans who literally flung themselves at him were relatively chaste. As his bodyguard, Alan Fortis, explained, Elvis needed somebody to baby him more than he needed a sex partner. He craved the attention of someone who adored him without the threat of sexual pressure, much as a mother would. Freud focused on the oral relationship as the central symbol in his primary stage of psychosexual ego development, the oral stage. For Freud, the path of ego development begins with the formational psychosexual bond with mother. An oral fixation, therefore, is a behavior that symbolizes the primary need to receive love and emotional support from an outside source, just as our mothers provided love and emotional support via the psychosexual act of breastfeeding, and later via the act of cooking and providing us food. An oral fixation is marked by a need to take in something via the mouth, such as food, that serves not only to fill us up, but to relieve our anxiety and need for emotional support and nurturing. Elvis was infamous for his overeating, a nervous habit, or oral fixation, that would ultimately be his downfall. Gladys always overindulged her beloved boy with fatty foods. Every day she baked a coconut cake just for him. She infantilized him, mushing up bowls of bananas and peanut butter for him to eat in front of the television. She loved nothing more than deep frying him peanut butter, banana, and bacon sandwiches, which he devoured by the dozen. One of Gladys's primary complaints following Elvis's success was that she wasn't needed to cook for Elvis, since Graceland was fully staffed with servants and chefs, and in any case, since Elvis was on the road so much, there was nobody to cook for. Without her baby to feed, Gladys felt useless and purposeless. Elvis's eating habits became legendary. One night at a roadside diner, Elvis ate 8 deluxe cheeseburgers, 2 bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwiches, and 3 chocolate milkshakes in one sitting. Another famous Elvis eating story involves his favorite sandwich, the Fool's Gold Loaf. Made by the Colorado Mine Company, a restaurant in Denver, Colorado. The sandwich consists of an entire hollowed-out loaf of bread, filled with an entire jar of peanut butter, an entire jar of jelly, and an entire pound of fried bacon. Elvis's oral fixations had dire consequences. Rock stars and Hollywood movie stars are not allowed to be fat. In order to fight the weight he put on due to his overeating of comfort foods, Elvis, like his mother, became addicted to dexedrine, a powerful amphetamine prescribed to him as diet pills. Elvis became dependent on speed to keep his weight down, but he also needed them to boost his ego prior to performances, as he suffered from crippling stage fright. The speed gave him both the energy and the confidence to perform. Drugs can also be considered oral fixations, not only because they're typically ingested orally, but also because they're external objects we take into our bodies to provide the emotional nourishment we need, but cannot attain by ourselves. The side effect of Elvis's pet pills was insomnia, which he countered with sleeping pills, also prescribed by doctors. Elvis became equally addicted to downers, and, as in the refrain to one of his most popular songs, he found himself caught in the trap of an extremely vicious and lethal cycle. Uppers to get up to perform, downers to come down and sleep, and then more uppers to get up and counter the drowsiness caused by the downers, and then more downers, and so on. This chemical roller coaster, unethically prescribed to him by irresponsible doctors, combined with his overeating and his preference for high-fat foods, would eventually destroy his congenitally weak heart, which he inherited from his mother. Quite literally, Elvis's appetites consumed him, ultimately to his death. The final blow for Gladys came in 1958, when the U.S. Army drafted Elvis and shipped him off to Germany for 2 years. While Elvis was still in boot camp, she died of a broken heart failure, at the age of 46. In her autobiography, Priscilla Presley, Elvis's wife, wrote, "As much as he consoled her, assured her that he would return from Germany in 18 months, and even begged her to join him, Gladys's fear of losing her only son drove her to the grave." When Elvis heard that his mother was deathly ill, he rushed home to Memphis from boot camp in Texas and held her hand for hours, speaking to her in their own private language, crying out to her in the pet name he had for her, Satnin. At the funeral, Elvis alarmed the mourners when he leapt onto the casket as it was about to descend into the earth, screaming, "Goodbye, darling, I lived my whole life for you." His bodyguard remarked insightfully, "Repeatedly, Elvis cried out, 'I lived my whole life for you.' But of course a good cause could be made that it was precisely the other way around, and that Gladys lived her whole life for her son. Rarely have two people wounded each other so deeply out of love." If Elvis's relationship with his mother was Oedipal in the all-consuming love and singular devotion they held for each other, Elvis's relationship with his father, Vernon, was equally Oedipal in the conflicted feelings that Elvis held towards him. Only 17 years old when he married Gladys, who was 4 years his senior, and only 18 when he became a daddy to Elvis, an incorrigible and notorious scamp, he liked to drink and chase the ladies. He worked odd jobs, but preferred to collect disability for his bad back. He was referred to by a welfare worker who knew him well as the crowned prince of lower back pain. When Elvis was a toddler, Vernon added a zero to a $4 check that he and two friends received for the sale of a hog. He tried to cash the bad check and was caught and sent to the penitentiary for 3 years. The tiny shotgun shack that Gladys and Elvis lived in was foreclosed upon. Forced to move in with family, Gladys was reduced to picking cotton and scrubbing other people's floors in order to feed Elvis. Sometimes they lived on handouts. The time that Vernon served in prison established the fact in Elvis's mind that Vernon could not be depended upon. Vernon's time away during Elvis's childhood fostered an exceedingly close and dependent relationship between Elvis and his mother. They had their own private made-up language. They slept together in the same bed through Elvis's early teens. Vernon would never be able to wedge his way into that close bond. Elvis was the sole recipient of his mother's love and physical affection. Elvis, as Oedipus, overthrew his ineffectual father, first by stealing away the love of Gladys, and then by becoming far more rich and successful than Vernon could ever dream of becoming. The only long-term well-paying job that Vernon ever had in his life was as his son's assistant.
Vernon was also a ladies' man, and his extramarital dalliances were the worst-kept secret in East Tupelo, a shame felt by both Gladys and her son.
When Elvis embarked on his musical career, he would head out on the road, leaving Gladys home alone with Vernon for the first time since they were newlyweds. One night, Elvis returned from the road to find his mama bruised and battered. He didn't need to ask what happened. When his father came home, Elvis slammed him against the wall. "Daddy, if this happens to Mama again, I swear I'll kill you." When Elvis was drafted and reported to boot camp in Texas, he confided to his close friend Lamar Fike, "You think I call Mama all the time because I miss her? Well, that's number one. But number two, if I ever catch Daddy hurting my Mama again, I'll fucking kill him." Elvis's Oedipal issues with Vernon continued even after Gladys died. One thing that drove Elvis literally crazy was when his father, always the ladies' man, would flirt with one of the countless girls who flocked around him. Once, while in the army in Germany, Vernon was in a car crash with Elizabeth Stefaniak, who was Elvis's live-in secretary and part-time lover. It was a serious accident, and she had to stay in the hospital for a week to recover. But the next time she saw Elvis, instead of asking if she was okay, he immediately launched into an angry, paranoid inquisition. "What the hell were you and my daddy doing that caused that wreck?"
It was also in Germany where Vernon met Dee Stanley.
The 35-year-old platinum blonde was an army wife who left her husband for Vernon. Elvis decreed firmly, "I'll never call her Mom." He made it a point not to attend his father's wedding. Though Vernon planned to move back into Graceland after they all returned from Germany, Elvis could not countenance the thought of Vernon and this strange woman sharing the bed and house he built for his mama. Elvis solved the problem by buying the house behind Graceland and giving it to the newlyweds as their wedding present. "That way, she won't be sleeping in my mama's bedroom," Elvis explained. Though she was a pleasant woman and a good wife to Vernon, Elvis would resent and dislike Dee for the rest of his life. When she entered the room, Elvis would immediately exit. His resentment, however, did not extend to Dee's sons, his stepbrothers, whom he readily accepted into the Memphis Mafia, his tight circle of male friends and relatives. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's longtime manager from 1956 until Elvis's death in 1977, was never actually in the military. Colonel was a self-made sobriquet. He had a strong, commanding personality and was a shrewd promoter and ruthless negotiator. Much has been said about the Colonel's management or mismanagement of Elvis's career, and of the fact that the Colonel's cut of Elvis's earnings was an extremely steep, some would say criminal, 50%. However, the plain truth is that Elvis trusted and needed the Colonel. Elvis saw in him the strong and responsible father figure that he never had in Vernon. Parker was also expert at providing Elvis with the thing that he was addicted to more than any drug, the boundless and unconditional love of millions of fans. Elvis depended both financially and emotionally on having an audience to shower him with love and adoration. and that was Parker's forte, providing Elvis with a perfect replica of his mother's unconditional love. Following Gladys's death, Elvis was riddled with guilt and grief. Everyone who knew Elvis admitted that there were three Elvises. The one before his mother's death, carefree, hopeful, and happy-go-lucky. The post-Gladys Elvis, while still humorous and fun, had a dark side, a brooding, angry, grief-stricken shadow that would come out at quiet times, especially when he was alone. And the third Elvis was the one after his wife, Priscilla, left him. Drug-addled, plagued by a myriad of physical and mental ailments, unmoored from reality, reclusive, sad, and lonely. Loved by millions, Elvis would ironically spend his short life in search of true love, finding it and losing it 3 times.
First, at birth, with the loss of his twin brother, Jesse. Second, at the midpoint of his life, with the death of his mother, Gladys.
And third, towards the end of his life, when his wife left him. Elvis hated to be alone. It was his greatest fear and was possibly related to the primordial memory of being physically connected with a twin, who was then taken away from him. As such, Elvis constantly surrounded himself with a huge entourage of friends, cousins, minions, well-wishers, gophers, bodyguards, drivers, lackeys, flunkies, stepbrothers, hangers-ons, and yes-men. A large protective circle who would come to be known as the Memphis Mafia. The primary purpose of the Mafia was to shield Elvis from the outside world, which he'd come to fear after the sudden, unexpected death of his mother, and also to make sure that Elvis was never, ever alone. Famously, Elvis could never sleep alone. He always needed the company of a female companion. Typically, this was not a sexual need, but an emotional one. Like a baby boy missing his mama, Elvis needed a maternal figure to snuggle with in order to feel safe and secure. When a girlfriend or wife was unavailable for co-sleeping, Elvis would get a female acquaintance to quite literally just sleep with him. Backup singers, secretaries, movie stars, and many other women all shared stories of spending sexless nights sleeping with Elvis. Many female groupies and fans who were ecstatic to find themselves in bed with the King of Hearts were rather surprised and often disappointed to find out that Elvis had no interest in having sex with them. When Elvis's amphetamine dependency and opioid addiction made him impotent, sex was frankly a moot point, and Elvis's only interest in female companionship was to quell his deep desire for maternal comforting. Following a protracted period of mourning after his mother's death, Elvis shipped off to Germany to complete his 2 years of army service. There, Elvis became a changed man. According to his close friend, Lamar Fike, after his mother died, Elvis just let loose sexually. He changed from a guy who liked an uncomplicated date into a sexual predator out to conquer. Another member of his inner circle said that we were running shifts of lovely girls in and out of the rented house. Sometimes he had 3 girls a night. I remember some sort of whim where Elvis wanted a blonde, a redhead, and a dark brunette, all in the same evening. It was sad to see him trying to shake off his heartbreak with sexual prowess, which only could provide a few moments of relief. The Oedipus complex resolves itself completely when the grown son can channel both his physical desire and his emotional love towards the same appropriate love object, a woman who is not his mother, though some physical or psychological resemblance to the mother is quite common. Elvis's complex was left unresolved, due to a combination of the uncommonly strong bond experienced by mother and son, which in itself was due to the uncommon circumstances of Elvis's birth and childhood, and also due to the untimeliness of Gladys's death.
When Gladys was alive, Elvis would only bring girls home to Graceland that his mother approved of.
These girlfriends were protégées for his future wife, the girl who would become the mother of his children, thereby becoming the replacement love object for his own mother. By all reports, Elvis's relationships with these girlfriends were quite chaste, never going beyond the strict limits of heavy petting and co-sleeping. While on the road, however, Elvis would be bombarded with groupies and fans who literally flung themselves at him. These loose women represented, in Elvis's mind, an entirely different category of female. Though he would have sex with them, he would never consider elevating any one of them to the level of girlfriend, and they would, of course, never be invited to Graceland, and would certainly never meet Gladys. The Memphis Mafia developed a nomenclature for the two categories of women in their boss's life. The pure one in Graceland was called a lifer, while the road girls were called queens for a day. Freud used the term the Madonna-whore complex to describe a man who never resolves his unconscious Oedipal feelings for his mother, so he is unable to unify the contrasting drives for taboo sex and the sacred love within his feelings for the same woman. Hence, the feelings must remain separate and must be directed separately towards different women. The taboo sex drive is directed towards the whore, while the untainted love drive is directed towards the Madonna, a virginal mother figure who remains sacred and pure. In Germany, Elvis became addicted to one-night stands, focusing on very young girls, often as young as 13. It's possible that he was so attracted to very young girls because they represented forbidden fruit, not just because it was illegal to have sex with them, but because they embodied the taboo amalgamation of both innocence and guilt, virginity and promiscuity, the sacred and the profane. Some biographers believe that Elvis preferred young girls because he himself was so immature. If Elvis never grew up emotionally, he would not be able to relate to women his own age, and would feel threatened by them. Elvis preferred to take on the fatherly role, protecting and caring for the young girls who flocked to him, like he did with his own mother, thus completing the psychosexual Oedipal loop. However, while Elvis fulfilled his erotic fantasies through countless one-night stands with young girls, he also needed to pay tribute to his dead mama by keeping a pure Madonna figure at home. In this way, Elvis always had a love object for both his sexual and non-sexual desires. Keeping the Madonna figure girlfriend was also his way of fulfilling his promise to Gladys, that he would one day settle down with a good girl, get married, and raise a family. Elvis started seeing Anita Wood, a native Memphian, in 1957, when Elvis was 22 and she 19. She eventually became his only serious girlfriend in Memphis and stayed with Elvis in Graceland whenever he was home. He told Anita that he loved her and intended to marry her one day, when the time was right. Their relationship was passionate, but Elvis refrained from going all the way with Anita, as he wanted to save that sacrament for their wedding night. The engagement was put on hold while he was in the army. Unbeknownst to Anita, Elvis had made the acquaintance of Priscilla, the 14-year-old daughter of an army officer in Germany. Priscilla was petite, demure, innocent, and, most significantly, a dead ringer for Elvis's mama. The resemblance between the two was nothing short of uncanny. It's entirely possible that Elvis may have believed that him meeting Priscilla, Gladys's doppelganger, soon after her death, was his mama's way of reconnecting with him from beyond the grave. They began dating regularly. Priscilla became a fixture at Elvis's house in Germany, becoming very close with his father and grandmother. They both were homesick for America. They both had experienced loss. Elvis confided to her about the loss of his twin brother and mother. Priscilla comforted him over the recent loss of his mother and emphasized with his grief, as Priscilla's biological father died when she was a toddler. "My heart went out to Elvis," Priscilla recalled in her autobiography. "He was a world-famous entertainer, a great star, and yet a terribly lonely man." Elvis and Priscilla engaged in co-sleeping and petting, but never had sex, though she often begged him to consummate the act. When it came time to leave Germany for home, the press noticed his pretty young companion at the airport, and her pictures in the papers were labeled with the caption, "The girl he left behind." Back in Memphis, Elvis resumed his relationship with his fiancée, Anita, but the romance became increasingly strained because Elvis was constantly cheating on her with groupies, fans, and movie co-stars. Also, even as their relationship entered its 5th year, Elvis was becoming less interested in setting a wedding date and preferred to avoid the subject altogether. Though he really did love Anita, Elvis was also aware of his own libidinous urges, and he doubted his ability to stay true to any woman. His Madonna-whore complex was, in reality, destroying his relationship with Anita. Elvis truly believed that if he did get married, that he would be legally, morally, and spiritually obliged to stay faithful to his wife in body and in mind for the rest of his life. Elvis just didn't know if he could live up to such a formidable commitment. Based on his many biographies, it's doubtful that Elvis ever had sex with a woman that he actually loved until his wedding night. Peter Whitmer suggested that he and his wife Priscilla may have only had sex one time, on their wedding night, resulting in the conception of their daughter, Lisa Marie, born exactly 9 months after her parents' wedding. While Whitmer's suggestion is certainly untrue, it does point to Elvis's true inability to combine sex with love, especially in his marriage. Though he had long-term romantic relationships with many girlfriends, such as Judy Spreckles, Wanda Jackson, and Anita Wood, Elvis never had actual intercourse with any of them, telling them all that he wanted them to be virgins, if and when they got married. There is also the odd quirk, corroborated by various members of the Memphis Mafia, that Elvis absolutely refused to have sex with any woman who had borne a child. In their nightly rounds of collecting willing female companions for their boss, the boys were under strict orders to weed out any women who were mothers. After 5 years together, Elvis's unwillingness to set a wedding date or to consummate their sexual relationship drove Anita beyond the point of frustration. The final straw came when she found his love letters from Priscilla. That revealed his true feelings for the young girl and the fact that he'd made similar promises of engagement, and that he was flying her over for an extended visit in Memphis. Anita broke off their engagement. Once Anita was out of the picture, Priscilla became Elvis's only true girlfriend. Though he had highly publicized flings with various movie co-stars, such as Anne Margaret, Nancy Sinatra, and Sybil Shepherd, they were always short-lived, and they were never brought home to Graceland. Priscilla, on the other hand, was confined to Graceland on her extended visits from Germany and was rarely allowed to accompany Elvis to Hollywood. Elvis convinced Priscilla's parents to let her finish high school in Memphis, intimating that they would marry when Priscilla turned 18 and graduated. Her parents knew that it would be foolhardy to forbid their daughter from being near Elvis. She was so head over heels in love with him. She would certainly have run off to be with him if they refused. The deal was, Priscilla was to be enrolled in a good Catholic school in Memphis, that she was to live with and be chaperoned by Elvis's father and new stepmother, and not live in Graceland with Elvis, and that she would keep her grades up and finish school. She did attend school and graduate, but she did not live with Vernon and Dee. Priscilla lived in Graceland, sharing Elvis's bed. But when her 18th birthday and her high school graduation came and went, and when 4 more years passed by with no mention of a wedding date, Priscilla and her parents were all concerned that the promises of marriage would never materialize. By 1967, Priscilla and Elvis had been romantically involved for 10 years, yet to Priscilla's double frustration, she was still a virgin, and she was still unmarried. Whenever she begged him to consummate their lovemaking, Elvis would demur, saying that he didn't want to spoil her before they were married, and that sex was a very sacred thing to him. Priscilla recalled that they engaged in a lot of foreplay, as well as a good deal of kinky voyeurism and role-playing, involving Polaroid cameras and costumes. She also noted that Elvis enjoyed fondling her itty-bitty sooties, as he called them, in a sexual manner. Elvis's well-documented foot fetish was possibly related to the foot rubs he gave his mother when he was a little boy. The Mafia were instructed when gathering consorts for the boss that only girls with pretty feet were allowed to be near Elvis. Notwithstanding the Polaroids and the foot play, Priscilla was becoming more and more frustrated and unsatisfied. When Priscilla discovered Elvis's old love letters from Anita, revealing that he was two-timing her with another fiancée for years. Elvis's ongoing trivial sexual indiscretions were also becoming more blatant and manifest. However, it was Priscilla's stepfather, a tough Air Force officer, who finally forced Elvis's hand. Colonel Bouillot threatened to press charges against Elvis under the Mann Act, a federal law forbidding the transport of a minor across state lines for sexual purposes. Even if the charges failed to result in a conviction, the publicity would have ruined Elvis's career. Several years earlier, the extremely promising career of another Southern rock star, Elvis's good friend Jerry Lee Lewis, was completely derailed when the press discovered that he was engaged to marry his cousin, who was just 13 years old. Though Elvis and Priscilla never had sex, their decade-long relationship during which Priscilla lived with Elvis, shared his bed, and which began when Priscilla was only 14 years old, and which included a great deal of kinky sex play, would have been rather hard to explain. Long story short, they were married on May 1st, 1967. Their daughter Lisa Marie was born exactly 9 months later, on February 1st, 1968. There was an Oedipal quality to Elvis's and Priscilla's relationship. When they met, he was an established international rock icon and movie star, as well as a trained soldier, while she was a 14-year-old schoolgirl, shy and nervous and feeling foreign and out of place in Germany.
Elvis's close friend, Joe Esposito, recalls that the physical resemblance between Priscilla and Gladys had a marked effect on Elvis.
I was there, and the look on his face when she entered a room was a giveaway. The look, the dark hair, the deep-set eyes. Priscilla's biographer, Sandra Harmon, believed that Priscilla tried to be the mother in the relationship. She tried to give him what he needed and to be what he needed. Elvis's psychobiographer, Peter Whitmer, noted that Elvis doted on Priscilla, but in an asexual way, confusing giving care with giving love, thereby building a replica of Gladys. The specter of Gladys was always present. To Elvis, Priscilla was an embodiment of his mother. As a couple, Elvis and Priscilla's relationship mirrored Elvis's relationship with Gladys in certain ways. They called each other by the same peculiar term of endearment that Elvis and his mother used, satinin, and they began speaking in a private language, referring to feet as itty-bitty sooties and to water as butch. I loved babysitting Elvis, she recalled. He had a little boy quality that could bring out the mother instinct in any woman, a beguiling way of seeming utterly dependent. However, though they shared a bed, they almost never had sex. Before marriage, sex was out of the question. After their wedding night, Priscilla became pregnant almost immediately, putting a definite cramp in their sex life. And then, after Lisa Marie was born,
Elvis's sexual desire for Priscilla simply vanished.
after many sexless nights of begging and pleading, Elvis finally explained the issue to his desperate wife, saying that he believed it was wrong for him to have sex with the mother of his child. It just isn't right, he explained. A final blow to their sex life was Elvis's frequent trips away, especially his extended stays in Hollywood, where he made 3 movies a year throughout the 1960s. There was no way that Priscilla could compete with the young starlets in Hollywood, who were always new, always sexy, and always not the mother of his child, or the spitting image of his own mother. The end result was that Elvis satisfied his carnal desires in LA and came home for family time and relaxation, while Priscilla, as did Gladys, left alone in Graceland, felt frustrated, abandoned, and neglected. Of that time, Priscilla wrote in her diary, "I am beginning to doubt my own sexuality as a woman. My physical and emotional needs are unfulfilled." In his paper on narcissism, Freud introduces the construct of narcissism as a form of neurosis, in which the individual redirects the love and adoration usually focused towards an external love object back onto himself. Because the narcissist loves himself more than anyone else, he tends to shut himself off from others and tends to ignore the needs of others, while simultaneously expecting that others will always fulfill his own needs. Always eager to please Elvis, Priscilla passively allowed Elvis to make her over, in the vain hope that he would return the love she felt for him, both emotionally and physically. He had her hair dyed jet black, just like his, and put her hair up in a female version of his own infamous pompadour. He dressed her up in fancy, over-the-top costumes, just like his, and had her paint on layer upon layer of mascara and makeup, just as he wore makeup for his own theatrical performances. The end result was that Priscilla did not resemble Gladys so much as she began to resemble a smaller, female version of Elvis himself. Some biographers wondered if Elvis, the twinless twin, was witlessly endeavoring to recreate in Priscilla a mirror image of himself, a matching twin. Is it possible that Elvis was trying to fill two voids in his relationship with Priscilla? The voids left by both Jesse and Gladys when they died? Was Elvis unconsciously trying to turn Priscilla to the only thing he could truly love, an exact replica of himself? After much soul-searching, Priscilla realized that though she loved Elvis, and though she knew he loved her in his own way, Elvis was ultimately incapable of having a truly equal and sharing relationship with another person. Elvis was so wrapped up in his own ego and his own superstar persona, he existed in a void of narcissistic self-love, and everyone around him was inevitably sucked into the vortex of that void. In order to be the complete woman that she needed to be, and in order to be the mother to Lisa Marie that she needed to be, Priscilla had to extricate herself from that void. In 1972, less than 5 years after they were married, Priscilla left Elvis. The loss of his wife shattered Elvis's bloated yet fragile ego. As he did when his mother died, he became unmoored, but this time he could not reel himself back into reality. The third Elvis emerged. As his stepbrother Billy Stanley noted, Elvis wasn't the same person after Priscilla left him. Just as he was devastated by the loss of his mother, he was equally devastated by the loss of his wife, but the terms were different. Gladys died. She didn't deliberately walk out on him. Though Elvis blamed himself for his mother's death, she died because she loved him too much and couldn't bear to be separated from him. His divorce from Priscilla was an exactly opposite situation. Priscilla deliberately walked out on him. Elvis blamed himself, and rightfully so, because it was his neglectful, self-indulgent, and narcissistic behavior that caused the rift between he and his wife. Though Priscilla did love him, it certainly wasn't a case of her loving him too much, or else she would have put up with him forever, regardless of his behavior. Furthermore, the fact that Priscilla indulged in an affair with her karate instructor was devastating to Elvis's engorged yet fragile ego, despite his countless flings. His narcissism wounded, Elvis ordered a hit on the man his wife had slept with. Fortunately, the murder never came to fruition, as no one in the Memphis Mafia stepped forward to pick up the gauntlet. If Elvis was a normal man, he might have been able to reflect on his wife's complaints, realize that he was mistaken in both his behaviors and his expectations for his wife's love.
And he could have changed his ways and salvaged his marriage.
But Elvis was not a normal man. He was Elvis, king of rock and roll, loved and adored by all. Without the ability to truly reflect on himself as a mortal man, Elvis could not change. So he did what he already knew how to do. Rather than adjusting himself to the needs of the world, he manipulated the world around himself to adjust to his own needs. Elvis sunk deeper and deeper into his hole of drug dependency, encircled by his gang of enablers. Regression, in Freudian theory, is a defense mechanism in which the individual deals with anxiety by returning to a less developed or former state of being. For Elvis, regression involved going back to a nearly infantile state in which he was completely cared for by his mother. His regression was fueled by limitless drugs and money. With money, he could buy anything he wanted, and with drugs, Elvis could function, but just barely. With speed, he could summon the energy and ego power to get on stage for 80 minutes a night, earning him the money to support his debauched lifestyle.
With barbiturates, Elvis could come down and descend into the deep sleep that he needed, which lasted up to 14 hours a day.
And with opioids, Elvis could spend his few waking hours in a placid, euphoric, painless, surreal, narcotic-induced pseudo-reality. A few months after Priscilla left him, Elvis began a relationship with a 21-year-old former beauty queen and Memphis native, Linda Thompson, who moved into Graceland and became Elvis's constant companion. Even more so than Priscilla, Linda played the role of a mother to Elvis. Though they did have sex in the early months of their relationship, Elvis's escalating amphetamine use eventually made him completely impotent. Little Elvis, Presley's pet name for his penis, regressed to a pre-adolescent state of sexless flaccidity. After a few months, Linda was reduced to babysitting Elvis, co-sleeping with him all day and taking care of him all night. Barbiturates and narcotics made him so completely out of it that he couldn't even feed and relieve himself. Dressed in a baby doll nightie, Linda would feed him by curling up to him in bed, stroking his hair and feeding him baby bites of food while speaking baby talk. Sometimes Elvis would fall asleep while chewing, forcing Linda to claw the food out of his mouth and windpipe, or else he would have choked to death. To complete the psychosexual regression to infancy, the narcotics immobilized Elvis and made him incontinent, so he often wore a diaper in bed, which Linda would have to change. Considering the state of their relationship, there's no wonder as to why Linda eventually had to walk away. The wonder is why she stayed with him for nearly 5 years. It's possible that Linda was attracted to very famous but troubled men, as a few years after her relationship with Elvis,
she married Bruce Jenner,
now known as Caitlyn Jenner, whom she later divorced. The last 5 years of Elvis's life was a precipitous downward slide into an abyss of total drug dependency and infantile regression. As his fame continued to grow and his dependence on drugs deepened, he withdrew further and further into himself. Elvis became solipsistic, living in his own self-created world of mystical beliefs and narcissistic demands. Surrounded by a protective circle of enablers who sheltered him from the world, indulged his every whim, and reinforced every behavior, no matter how eccentric, weird, or self-destructive, Elvis was completely out of touch with reality. He began to believe in the existence of his own crypto-mystical powers and pursued various drug-fueled, ego-driven fantasies. Like a modern-day Narcissus, he encircled himself in a world of perpetual self-indulgence and self-adoration. A hall of mirrors in which he could only see himself. On the morning of August 16, 1977, Elvis was sitting on the toilet reading. Since the opiates he took caused chronic constipation, Elvis spent a lot of time sitting on the toilet. His private bathroom suite was carpeted and had a small library of books. Elvis's health had declined precipitously that year, ever since Linda left him. At over 300 pounds, he'd become morbidly obese, and he'd overdosed on drugs many times, causing him to be hospitalized for several extended stays. Despite the rumors that he died of yet another overdose, on that summer morning in Graceland, Elvis's heart just suddenly stopped beating. He fell face forward onto his knees and was found frozen in that position. Elvis had finally left the building. Though the many drugs he took certainly took its toll on his health, it was his congenitally weak heart, which he inherited from his mother, along with all the bacon and peanut butter sandwiches, that finally did him in. He was laid to rest alongside his mother in Forest Lawn Cemetery, just down the road from Graceland. After only 42 years, the once was and everlasting king of rock and roll was gone, but not forgotten, leaving behind a loving daughter, a lasting legacy, and a world of fans.